So today was a rough day for me. Man, I wasted an entire nice day waiting for DHL. If you guys don't know what that is, they're a shipping delivery company that's international. They have some of the worst services because of how bad they are with their customer service, how slow they take. And I've been now waiting for Jacket going on now the second day that they didn't even bother to deliver. I do want to apologize for the noise in the background. It's the air unit right there. But hopefully that shit comes either later on today or early tomorrow morning. Luckily, I've done a signature to where, look, I don't have to sign for it when it comes. They can just put it on the doorstep, because I could have been out getting some more exercise today. You know, I always go for my walks for health purposes. I'm trying to, drop weight. Understand I'm 30 years old, so my, testosterone over the years may go down. But shit, I wasted an entire nice day, man. Like, it's only, almost 3 o'clock. But enough about that. So last night I got to thinking, right? And I'm still in the middle or almost near the ending of Red Dead 1. And as I started playing it, where I'm at right now, going back to the theory video I did talking about ChEDDErTarY, and going back to talking about, when I got to go back to Blackwater as John Marston, and how Beecher's Hope looked like. It looked abandoned, it completely boarded up. And that's what gave me that theory, because of just how it looked. And anybody that played part 1 and got to go to Beecher's Hope as John in the first one may know what I'm talking about with how it looked. But with this one, I started thinking to myself, because John always has encounters with death in both of the games, which begs me to question this, especially when it comes to wolves. Was John supposed to die in part 2 in the beginning? Was he always supposed to die? And I want to take about this really pretty slow, because I want people to try to understand, because this just ain't a theory, but it's a possibility of, was John supposed to die in the game? And was he supposed to die in the early stages and the beginning of part 2? And if so, how would that also affect Abigail and Jack, later on, in their lives? And I want to go about this, again, pretty slow, because I don't want to lose people. So if you go back to the beginning, John, from what I remember, I believe he gets hurt, right? I do believe he gets like a bullet, I believe, during the Blackwater shootout before heading into the mountains. And it began in Blackwater. It ended in Blackwater and his death. It may not have happened in Blackwater, but it happened near Blackwater, where he lives at, which is east or west of Elizabeth of Blackwater in the game. So either way, it all comes around first circle with his death. He got shot in Blackwater. Was he supposed to die in Blackwater? Well, he ended up dying near Blackwater anyways, for those that played the first Red Dead game. From there, he goes off. I forget why he went off to the mountains and why certain people split it up. Can't remember. But we see him almost near death and getting attacked by wolves. And the wolf in certain I guess Belize and, here in America, the wolf, when it comes to natives, is a spiritual animal of strength, guidance, leadership. The wolf that is the hunter, the predator, but somebody who isn't afraid to be hunted and protects his pack. And sometimes the wolf can stand on his own strength, which then goes and becomes the lone wolf, the howling of the spirit of freedom and pain. When it comes to the native believes in search of a spirit animal, and then you have the in quote unquote, white man's thing on the wolf, which is known as some animal that is a predator, a hunter, vicious, kills, hunts, and a symbolism of death, of having a bad conscience, but somebody who's trying to be who is trying to be a protector, but not really going about it the right way. Just like the deer in the game house represented a soft, peaceful soul who wants best for others, but one who was not worried, because the deer cannot be without the wolf. They cannot live without each other, because the wolf and the deer have always coexisted, and you had the deer always being hunted by the wolf. And the game, both of the game, the wolf is heavy painted as symbolic symbolism when it comes to many different things. So we see John getting ate by the wolves, which is that old saying, throw him to the wolves, let's see how he survives with the wolves. The wolves will chew him up and spit him out. So his life going downhill began in the mountains, along with Dutch. Dutch is the representation of a wolf in sheep's clothing, but in this case, a wolf in deer's clothing. We know that Dutch's death, he met his end in the mountains as well. In part 1, we see the wolves following John when he got saved by Arthur. And Arthur is painted as the representation of the protector, which is the gentle soul, the hunter, the fighter of the wolf, depending if you get low honor, or representation of the deer, who's a kind-hearted person, because every yin has its yang per se. Like I said, the wolf and the deer, they can't live without one another. Neither one of them can coexist without each other. So you have the lead wolf that are going to fight off the other packs of wolves, who is trying to take the other wolf is kill, if you will. So John is the deer, while Arthur was the wolf saving the deer. So while Arthur was killing those other wolves, they needed to lose their scent so they wouldn't get tracked back to camp. This isn't the first time the wolves followed John. The Pinkertons are painted as the wolves, hunting, stalking their prey, following their prey. John, was on his deathbed, almost, if not entirely on his deathbed, while healing up. We see John wanting to herd sheep, and Valentine. John, within each human character of a native perspective, is painted as a wolf, or in this case, a sheepdog, which are the dogs that are half wolf and half dog that police officers, use. John was leading the herd. The wolf was leading the herd. You had the deer, which is Arthur, leading the herd, helping the wolf as well. We know that John comes near death again during the Saint Denis bank robbery. He gets captured, right? The wolves corner the deer. You had the Pinkertons that are representation of the wolf. John is painted as the deer that are going to corner and capture their prey. Or in this case, you have hunters that lead what they want to hunt and take it back with them for, sacrificial slaughter, per se. John was supposed to be up on the chopping block as the wolf by other wolves, but being painted as the deer of, some people think deer are painted as weak. They're not weak animals, at all. They're very kind and gentle souls, what John was trying to be. I used to have deer running all through here, but up on the hill, the white man came and took the deer's home to build apartments that no one's buying because no one can afford them, which really sucks because I used to see deer running all through my backyard. They would hop the fence. I don't stay in the country or nothing like that, right in the suburbs, but it happens. The next time John would come close to death would be getting shot and falling off the train, becoming the wolf that is wounded but still wanting to fight back and happen to defend himself against his own pack that turned on him. Again, you got wolves that turn on other wolves. He went to go help the deer, which is Arthur, during the time. Which again, we get Dutch painted as, again, the wolf in sheep's clothing. From what we gathered from part 2 of the game, and especially by part 1, when we get there, during the epilogue mission, you have a couple of times where you have to kill and defend yourself off wolves in part 2 of the epilogue as John. Even during the first game, that's all the animals that you're pretty much fighting off as John is wolves, are black wolves. And I believe that they are the painting representation of the Grim Reaper, which is death. And let me tell you something. I had many experiences growing up to where I have a saying of mine, you can beat life, but you can't cheat death. And John, throughout his life in both of the games, have always cheated death. And when you cheat death, you become a mark on death's hit list. I was born with special ESP capabilities to where, I kind of like psychic powers. I may not know how to use them fully, but I have a thing, sometimes I can hear, see spirits, talk to them, if not almost cross into the land between death and the living. I have died at birth. There's times where, I should have never have been alive in certain situations, but I outlived a lot of people, and I'm at the age of 30. And there's times where I can hear black mist of death's minions saying, "You have the smell of death on you." And that's exactly what the representation of all of these wolves are. They're the messengers to John, saying, "Look, you have the smell of death on you. You have the smell of death on you." And John may have not recognized the signs, but I have recognized certain things in life and signs which always kept me alive till this day. Even when you take a look at a lot of the death encounters that John have had throughout part 1 with Bill, 3 times, Javier once, and then Dutch, his crew, once. It again is the representation of, you know, death. And death was always around John, while John was trying to be the deer with the calm heart, the calm soul, to be peaceful, but it wasn't meant for him. He was meant to be a wolf. Dutch, again, in part 1, was painted as a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was leading his lambs to the slaughter when John and the army went to go invade. Dutch is, hideout up in the mountains. Again, which goes back to what I said, it began in Blackwater for John, it ended in Blackwater. It began in the mountains for Dutch, it ended in the mountains for Dutch. In there. At the end, the wolves came for John and slaughtered him like the wolves tried to kill him in part 2. So because of this, I do believe John was supposed to actually die either off screen in part 2 at the beginning or on screen in the beginning, which I do believe that were to happen. Abigail, the way she was then and the way she is now, to me is just not a good person, and I don't believe she would really care about John if he were to die. Jack wouldn't really know who his father is anyways, because he never really got to truly be with his father, and John left him. I do think Abigail and Jack lives would have actually been better, because I believe once they would have got off the mountain without John and John being dead, I do believe Arthur would have gave Abigail and Jack his blessing to leave the group. I do believe their lives would have been better. I do believe, she would have had the ranch, would have ran it with Jack and her, by herself. And, Jack wouldn't, Jack never became a gunslinger. A lot of people think he did. He just never became an outlaw. If you go back to play Grand Theft Auto 5, and if you go to Franklin's house that's in the hills, and you look on the bookshelf, you're going to see a blue book in red lettering that says Red Dead, and you're going to see the initials JM that stands for Jack Marston. So I do believe when Jack got older, if John were to die, he would have all this information and stories, journals and letters about the gang, from his mother to finding Dutch's letters and journal, his father's, Arthur's. I do believe Mary Beth and Tilly, would have gotten in contact with them to check up on him years later. Abigail would, still be an old woman by the time John got pretty much in his 20s. She may not probably would have been that old, but, she probably at least would have been her 40s at the most. And there would have been no need to really go after, Ross to kill him for revenge, because Jack would have never have cared anything about that. I do believe because of that, he would have been, a strong individual, but he wouldn't have been violent, which then it goes into, why people don't like Jack at all. If you go into real life psychological examinations or something like that, at a young kid, for people that experience things like that in real life, it's embedded in them mentally in their brain that they're supposed to be a violent individual, and eventually things that lead to, which is either death or life in prison or end up on death row. And for some people, they may not know how to cope with it because they have no one to talk to, and they don't A lot of people think going to see a therapist is considered weak when it's not. I mean, they didn't have therapists back then either. So how that affected Jack growing up, it made him scared of the real world because what he experienced in order for him to escape from reality was always books and learning, which he did break the mold of having an education, the first one properly to do. So maybe a lot of people now will see it different with me saying that. But yes, I do believe John was supposed to die in RDR2. And I do believe that depending on how you play both of the games, that Arthur was the wolf, but he wasn't the bad wolf. Later on, he became the deer, why John became the wolf, but then got slaughtered by wolves in the end. So I do believe John was always supposed to die, and the first mission and part 2 of the game, now that I think about it. With that being said, I'm out.